Hello, curious minds. Welcome to this intellectual journey. Have you ever wondered what connects an explorer like Christopher Columbus to a nightmare world like the one in the Hunger Games saga? The answer is deeper and darker than you might imagine because both stem from the same human impulse. Today, we're going to explore how travel literature, from real-life chronicles to the most fantastical utopias and dystopias, isn't just a way to escape our world. It's a way to understand our deepest desire to discover, to order, and sometimes to dominate reality itself. Before we dive in, I wanted to tell you something about the images you're seeing. To bring this narrative to life, I've used artificial intelligence tools. So think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and mood of what I'm telling you. They won't always be a literal representation, but rather a visual accompaniment. I truly hope you enjoy it. It all begins with the real journey. Let's think about the Age of Discovery. When European explorers arrived in the Americas, they didn't just find new lands, they found a blank page upon which they could write a new story, a narrative that would serve their own interests. Ship logs and colonial chronicles weren't just objective reports. They were pieces of literature. They used language to transform the unknown into something comprehensible, and more importantly, into something possessible. Naming a river or a mountain was the very first act of conquest. These texts created an image of the New World for Europeans. An image often idealized or conversely demonized. Reality was filtered through narrative. The word didn't just describe the world, it was creating it in the eyes of those thousands of miles away. Think about it for a moment. By describing a place as an earthly paradise, full of riches and ownerless, a moral and economic justification for colonization was being built. Literature became a tool of domination as powerful as the sword. This act of imagining and defining a world from scratch didn't stay confined to exploration narratives. It ignited a spark in the minds of Europe's thinkers and philosophers. If a new world could be found, why couldn't a perfect one be invented from the ground up? And thus utopia is born. The word, coined by Thomas More in 1516, literally means no place. It's the idea of a perfectly designed society, an imaginary world where all the problems of real society, like poverty, war, and injustice, have been resolved. More's utopia was an island where private property didn't exist, work was shared, and reason ruled over passion. It was a direct critique of the England of his time, rife with conflict and inequality. An exercise in social engineering on paper? Other utopias followed, like Campanella's City of the Sun or Francis Bacon's New Atlantis. All shared a fundamental trait, the belief that society could be rationally planned to achieve perfection, total control to achieve a common good. But let's pause here. Doesn't that desire for control sound familiar? It's the same impulse as the colonizer, that of imposing order on what is perceived as chaotic. Utopia is, in a way, a form of intellectual colonization. It's taking an empty space, the imagination, and building a perfect system. The problem, as history has taught us, is that perfection often comes at a very high price. The pursuit of absolute order can easily turn into oppression. What happens when the dream of utopia transforms into a nightmare? This is where we enter the territory of dystopia. Dystopia is the dark reflection of utopia. It's the imagination of a world where the attempt to create a perfect society has resulted in a totalitarian, dehumanizing, and oppressive system. Consider George Orwell's 1984. The government, the party, controls every aspect of life, not just actions, but thoughts too. It uses constant surveillance, propaganda, and language manipulation to maintain absolute power. Newspeak in 1984 is a perfect example. It's a language designed to limit freedom of thought. If you don't have the words to express rebellion, you can't rebel. It's the same principle as the colonial narrative, using language to control reality, but taken to its most terrifying extreme. Or let's consider Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Here, control isn't achieved through fear, but through pleasure. Society is engineered so that everyone is happy with their place, thanks to genetic manipulation, psychological conditioning, and drugs that eliminate any negative feelings. In this brave new world, individuality, art, and true love have been sacrificed at the altar of stability. It's a utopia of comfort that conceals a deep spiritual dystopia, a gilded cage. The control is so complete that people don't even realize they aren't free. Now, for the interesting part, the tools of control in these dystopias, surveillance, propaganda, classification of people, suppression of native culture, aren't they extreme versions of the very same tools used in colonial empires to govern conquered peoples? The colonial narrative classified indigenous people as savages to justify its dominance. Dystopia classifies its citizens into castes or districts to maintain order. The act of mapping, defining, and controlling is exactly the same, only the setting changes. So the circle closes. The real journey of the explorer, who uses narrative to possess a new world, inspires the imaginary journey of the utopian, who designs a perfect world based on total control. And this dream of total control, when corrupted, gives birth to the dystopian's nightmare journey. Travel literature, in all its forms, is a laboratory. It's a safe space where humanity explores its deepest impulses, the desire to go beyond the horizon, to find or create a better world, and the dangerous desire to control everything to fit our idea of perfection. Thus, from the dazzling landscapes described by colonial chroniclers to the oppressive streets of Panem in The Hunger Games, the story is the same. It's the story of how we use maps and words not just to understand the world, but to attempt to dominate it. Colonial chronicles are, in a sense, the first fictions about the New World, fictions with devastatingly real consequences. They set a precedent for how a powerful narrative can shape the perceptions of millions and justify far-reaching actions. Utopia, for its part, takes this narrative power and directs it towards the future. It imagines a society where laws don't just regulate behavior, but actually mold the human soul. It's the fantasy of the legislator as an artist sculpting the ideal society. This yearning for perfection is deeply human. We all desire a world without suffering. But utopian literature forces us to ask, what are we willing to sacrifice for that order? Freedom? Individuality? The very chaos that makes us human? It is dystopia that answers that question with a terrible warning. It shows us that the road to hell is often paved with good intentions. Absolute control, even if sought for the common good, inevitably corrupts and dehumanizes. Consider how current technology approaches some of these fictions. Facial recognition, algorithms that predict our behavior, social media that creates echo chambers. These are echoes of the surveillance and conditioning we saw in classic dystopias. That's why these books are more relevant than ever. They're not just fantastic stories. They're mirrors showing us the potential consequences of our own social and technological ambitions. They remind us to be wary of those who promise paradise in exchange for control. The connection, therefore, is undeniable. The mindset that maps an unknown continent to claim it is the same one that designs a perfect society on paper. Both seek to replace the complex, the organic, and the uncontrollable with an ordered, predictable system. The great lesson of this literary journey is humility. It teaches us to distrust simple solutions and perfect systems. Diversity, conflict, and even chaos are essential components of the human experience and a truly free society. So, the next time you read about a journey to distant lands or immerse yourself in a brilliant utopia or a somber dystopia, remember the invisible thread that connects them. It's the eternal human struggle between the desire to explore the unknown and the impulse to control everything. The colonial narrative imposes a map onto the land. Utopia imposes a map onto society. And dystopia shows us the terrifying landscape that remains when the map becomes more important than the territory, when the system becomes more important than the human being. This journey through literature reveals that the worlds we imagine say a great deal about the world we live in. They reflect our deepest fears, our wildest hopes, and above all, our complex and often contradictory nature. The explorer, by naming a river, believes they possess it. The utopian reformer, by designing a law, believes they can perfect man. Both, in their zeal to order, risk destroying the wild beauty they attempt to contain, whether in a continent or in the human soul. Dystopias, then, are not just a literary genre. They are a cultural defense mechanism. They are the nightmares we tell ourselves to prevent our dreams of a better world from becoming prisons of perfection. They remind us to be careful what you wish for. Ultimately, the literature of exploration, whether real or imaginary, isn't so much about the places we go, it's about ourselves. About the impulse that leads us to set sail, to write, to dream, and about the responsibility that comes with the power to create worlds, whether with ships or with words. Consider that the act of writing a colonial chronicle was a way to domesticate the wild. By naming things, by classifying them according to European parameters, their intrinsic power, their mystery, was stripped away, and they were integrated into a system of knowledge that was, in itself, a system of power. This cataloging of the world is a direct echo of what utopian societies do. In them, each citizen has a defined role, a function. Society is a well-oiled machine, and people are its cogs. The efficiency of the system is prioritized over the freedom of the individual. Now let's look at Ray Bradbury's dystopia Fahrenheit 451. In this society, books are forbidden because they generate contradictory thoughts and therefore unhappiness. The goal is a kind of utopia of ignorance, where people are happy because they don't have to confront complex ideas. Here, control is exercised by eliminating history, by erasing the past. This is again a colonial tactic. Often, the first action of a conquering power is to destroy or rewrite the history and culture of the conquered people to impose its own. The line connecting these worlds is the belief in a blank slate. The American continent was viewed as a blank slate by colonizers. Society is a blank slate for the utopian thinker. The human mind is a blank slate for the dystopian state. But the reality is there's never a blank slate. There's always a previous history, a culture, a complex human nature that resists being erased and rewritten. And it's in that resistance that the most powerful stories emerge, those of rebellion and the fight for freedom. The colonial narrative, despite its intention of domination, couldn't avoid recording, sometimes inadvertently, the richness of the cultures it encountered. In the same way, in the most oppressive dystopias, there are always characters who remember, who love, who fight to reclaim what was lost. So are utopias inherently evil? Not necessarily. As a thought experiment, they help us identify the problems of our own society and imagine alternatives. The danger isn't in dreaming of a better world, but in believing that there's only one version of that better world and that it can be imposed by force. Literature functions as an immune system for society. It injects us with small doses of possible futures, both good and bad, so that we can develop antibodies against dangerous ideas. It trains us in empathy and critical thinking. By traveling to More's Utopia, to Tolkien's Middle-earth, or to Collins's Panem, we're doing much more than just escaping. We're participating in a millennia-old dialogue about how we should live together. We're exploring the most complex map of all, that of the human heart. Colonialism didn't end when colonies gained independence. It persists in economic and cultural forms. So-called neo-colonialism continues to operate under the same logic, the imposition of one cultural or economic model over another, presenting it as the only path to progress. Similarly, utopian tendencies persist in political discourses that promise total and definitive solutions to society's problems. Often, these discourses demand blind loyalty and the suppression of dissent, reflecting the dark side of perfect planning. And the shadows of dystopia lengthen with every debate about data privacy, artificial intelligence, and genetic modification. We're at a point where technology makes it possible, for the first time in history, to build systems of control as absolute as those imagined by Orwell or Huxley. Literature, therefore, is our canary in the coal mine. Writers are the seismographs of society, detecting the tremors of the future long before they become earthquakes. Reading these works is a way to stay alert. The journey in the end is always a journey of transformation. The explorer who returns is not the same as the one who departed. The reader who closes a book is not the same as the one who opened it. We confront the unknown, whether on a distant sea or on a printed page, and that changes us. The fundamental question these narratives leave us with is about power. Who has it, how it's used, and what limits it should have. The power to name, the power to organize, and the power to control. The history of civilization is, to a large extent, the story of how we've grappled with these three forms of power. Exploration narratives teach us about the power of narrative to shape history. Utopias teach us about the allure and danger of centralized power. And dystopias teach us about the necessity of resisting power when it becomes absolute. So this isn't just a topic of literature, it's a topic of citizenship. Understanding these patterns makes us more aware of the narratives that surround us today. In the news and politics, in advertising, it helps us discern when a story is being told to free us and when it's being told to control us. Let's return to the idea of the map. A map is a useful tool, but it's always a simplification of reality. The problem arises when we forget this and try to force the complexity of the real world to fit into the simple lines of our map, be it geographic, social, or ideological. The literature of imaginary journeys invites us to do the opposite, to embrace complexity, to understand that there can be multiple maps, multiple ways of seeing and organizing the world. It encourages us to be explorers, not conquerors, of the vast territory of human experience. Think of the sea monsters drawn on the edges of ancient maps in the unexplored areas. Those monsters represented the fear of the unknown. Dystopian literature draws similar monsters on the edges of our social and technological progress, warning us of the dangers that lurk. Utopia, on the other hand, tries to erase those monsters from the map to declare all territory safe and known. But in doing so, it often creates a much worse monster, that of forced conformity, hiding in the very heart of the perfect city. The colonial narrative often described the inhabitants of new lands as monsters, or at best as innocent children who needed to be civilized. It was a way to dehumanize them, to turn them into objects over whom power could be exercised without moral qualms. This mechanism of dehumanization is key in dystopias. In 1984, enemies of the state are dehumanized as traitors. In Brave New World, those who feel deep emotions are seen as sick and in need of conditioning. The system protects itself by defining the other as inferior or dangerous. Therefore, the ability to see the full humanity in the other, in the one who is different, is the most fundamental act of resistance against colonial and dystopian logics. It's an act that good literature fosters by making us live for a moment within another person's skin. Real exploration stopped when the world was fully mapped, but literary exploration is infinite. There will always be new worlds to imagine, new utopias to dream, and new dystopias to warn us about, because human nature and society are constantly changing. Each generation reinterprets these stories. 1984 was read one way during the Cold War and is read another way in the age of digital surveillance. These works are not static, they are living conversations we have with the past about the dilemmas of the present and the fears of the future. The act of traveling implies vulnerability, the acceptance that one doesn't have control. The conqueror and the dystopian dictator hate vulnerability. They seek to eliminate it. The true explorer, like the true reader, embraces it as an opportunity to learn and grow. At heart, we are all cartographers of our own lives, creating narratives to make sense of the chaos of existence. The stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and our society define the limits of what we believe is possible. Literature offers us new pencils and new scrolls. Colonialism left physical and cultural scars on the world that are still visible today. Literary utopias and dystopias leave scars on our collective consciousness, permanent reminders of our noblest aspirations and our most dangerous impulses. Thus, the impulse to explore, discover, and dominate isn't something of the past. It's woven into the DNA of our civilization. Recognizing it is the first step to channeling it towards creation and not destruction, towards understanding and not oppression. The journey has taken us from sailing ships on unknown seas to the impossible cities of the imagination. We've seen how the same desire for order can create both a dreamed paradise and a perfectly administered hell. We've discovered that literature isn't merely a reflection of history, but an active force within it. The stories we tell matter. They shape our beliefs, justify our actions, and construct the worlds we inhabit. From the colonial narrative that claimed lands in the name of a king, to the dystopia that warns us about total control in the name of security, the tension is always the same: individual freedom versus collective order. These stories equip us with a healthy skepticism. They teach us to ask questions. Who tells this story? Who benefits from it? What is left off the map? What freedoms are sacrificed at the altar of this particular utopia? So literature is ultimately a tool of exploration, not of new continents, but of new possibilities. It allows us to travel through time, inhabit other minds, and see the world from perspectives that would otherwise be denied to us. The power to imagine a different world is the first step to changing our own. Whether inspired by a utopia or warned by a dystopia, fiction prompts us to reflect and potentially to act. It reminds us that the future is not written. I hope this journey has revealed the hidden connections between the worlds we discover and the worlds we invent, and that it has shown you the immense power that resides in the simple act of telling a story. The next time you see a map, remember it's not just a representation of space, it's a representation of power. And the next time you read a novel, remember it's not just an escape, it's an act of exploring what it means to be human. Colonialism used narrative to justify domination. Utopia uses narrative to design perfection. Dystopia uses narrative to warn about control. 3 genres, 3 ways of traveling, but one single engine, the unceasing human impulse to shape the world. The lingering question is, what stories are we telling today? What worlds are we building with our words, our technologies, and our decisions? Are we exploring, or are we, without realizing it, colonizing the future? I don't have a definitive answer, but I believe the key is to keep reading, keep questioning, and keep exploring. Because it's in the multitude of stories and perspectives that we find the wisdom to navigate our own complex journey. In summary, the journey from real-life chronicles to the boldest fictions is a mirror of our own evolution. It reveals our capacity for greatness and creation, but also our dangerous inclination towards control and domination. Literature is the map of this duality. Ultimately, the power of literature lies not in giving us easy answers, but in teaching us to formulate the important questions. And the question of how to balance freedom and order is perhaps the most important of all. Exploring these worlds, both real and imaginary, teaches us that every promised paradise has a hidden cost, and that often the monster to avoid isn't in distant lands, but within ourselves, in our own desire for a perfect order. The knowledge of these stories is a compass. It helps us navigate the complex currents of politics, technology, and society. It allows us to recognize old patterns in new discourses and choose our course with greater wisdom. So let's continue to be travelers, travelers of books, of ideas, of perspectives, because in a world that increasingly pushes us towards simple certainties and ideological tribes, the ability to explore the unknown with an open mind is our most necessary act of rebellion. The conclusion is that the line separating the explorer from the conqueror, the visionary from the tyrant, is often very thin. Literature is the field where we explore that line. We cross it in the safety of fiction to learn not to cross it in reality. We've traveled far from the jungles of the New World to the stars, but the ultimate destination of our journey has always been the same: a deeper understanding of the strangest and most wonderful of all unexplored lands, the human condition. There you have it. The impulse to explore and the impulse to control are two sides of the same coin, and universal literature is the story of how humanity has tossed that coin in the air again and again, hoping it lands on the side of freedom. Thank you so much for joining me on this profound and revealing intellectual journey. Your curiosity is the fuel that makes these explorations possible. It has been a true honor to share these ideas with all of you. If you found this analysis interesting and want to keep uncovering the secrets hidden within great universal literature, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Your support is crucial for this channel to keep growing. And now it's your turn. What other literary work, be it utopian, dystopian, or travel-related, do you think explores this duality between discovery and domination? Leave your theories and recommendations in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Until next time.